All right, good morning and welcome to In Search of Prosperity Sisterhood. We are so glad to have you here this morning. And if you notice, I have another one on my screen, a fellow sister here in our sisterhood. Good morning, Dawn. We're so happy to have you. Dawn has been sharing some of her leadership journey with us over the last couple months, and we've been cheering her on, and she is moving and shaking. And one of our conversations this couple weeks ago, I was like, sounds like you got to dream a little bigger, huh, Dawn? She's everything we've put out in this sisterhood is happening, is moving and shaking and all those things. So Dawn is a leader in her field. She is in the medical field and just kicks butt in that every single day. She talks about her team a lot here. And we said, hey, Dawn, will you talk to us more about what leadership is? And we we've talked more even to the setting expectations and what that can look like on every level. And I'm going to let Dawn take over because she is just going to soapbox us and get us on that same
Yeah.
page and really just light a fire under us. She's a little spitfire. She says she's small. I've not met her in person. So I'm like, I just imagine this short little fiery little thing. And bring it on. Bring us some Dawn.
All right. Um, well, I am little. I maybe stand 5 feet tall, flat-footed, 110 pounds wet. So yes, but I get things done. So small and mighty. So we'll say that. So I appreciate you inviting me today to talk a little bit about leadership and some of the things that I've done with setting expectations with my teams. Uh, I'm currently doing learning sessions, we'll call them, with my team members and my fellow nurse managers and directors and our VP of nursing even, regarding building trust in leadership. We've dissected it down to 3 different areas: transparency, empathy, and consistency. But in all of those areas, setting clear expectations is a big part in it. And that's what I feel has led to a lot of the success that my teams have experienced. And I've kind of taken expectations and even broken that down further into 5 key areas that I try to follow as my roadmap for success. And again, I'm going to use my field as an example and try and throw in some personal examples all at the same time. But the first one is just having that alignment and focus. So when I set expectations, I'm not going to just frivolously pick something out of random. I do try to set big, wild, and obnoxious goals. But one example, just so you have something tangible, is I run an observation unit. Best practice in the nation is to have patients admitted and discharged within 18 hours. And when I started with my team back in October of 22, I said to them, let's be best practice in the nation. So there's my wild goal, 18 hours. I want length of stay of 18 hours. We were at 29. So how do you get there? So that right there was my expectation. We're going to get to 18 hours. That was my wild goal. But then I needed to align that goal with what our mission, vision, and values were of the organization. So why was that important? Or was I just going out on a random rogue tangent and saying that it was for my own personal benefit? So I needed to set that expectation with them that for us, we needed to align that that length of stay was going to have quality aspects to it, safety aspects to it, patient experience aspects to it, employee engagement, all of the above, and focus on those as kind of our pillars as we built off of that. So that was my first job, was to align it with our mission, vision, and values. The second was accountability and ownership. So anytime we worked on a process or a piece of that process, we wanted to make sure that I was constantly feeding them back. So consistently feeding them back data and information regarding how we were doing. I was saying that I am the CEO of this department right here. So I am where it stops. If this is the expectation I set, what are your barriers? What are your obstacles? constantly working with them, because I can't just hold them accountable to say we're going to go from 29 hours to 18 hours overnight. Letting them know that this is a long process and that I expect it to be a long process. None of us, excuse me, none of us set out the beginning of the year saying we're going to lose 20 pounds on January 1st, and by January 2nd, we're already down 10. It just doesn't happen. So being realistic with your expectations allows for not only yourself, but your team that you're working with to take accountability for their actions. They're not fearful of making a mistake. They're not fearful of having a day that might be chalked up to a failure, so to speak, if they weren't moving the needle in the right direction. But again, if we keep pushing forward with, okay, this is the clear goal. This is what we're saying. It has to be clear. Clarity reduces confusion. As long as everybody knows what direction we're going in, they can always ask questions. I invite questions. I ask for questions. If I say, how is everything going? And they tell me it's great, I tell them they're lying to me. Be honest about it, because any questions that can be brought forward regarding expectations only provides clarity, reduces confusion, reduces workarounds, gives me as the leader the opportunity to provide clearer communication regarding that particular part of a process, a product, a workflow, a team member, whichever one it is, because that's laying the foundation. Confusion puts holes in your foundation. So we have to have clarity when it comes to expectations. If I'm doing my job and I feel I'm doing it very well, I go home at night thinking I did a fantastic job, and I come home the next day to an email saying, Dawn, what the heck just happened? There's going to be questions. Maybe it was I didn't understand what the process was. Maybe it was I didn't understand truly the workflow. Maybe it wasn't I didn't have any idea regarding documentation. Maybe I just didn't understand that piece of it was important. And again, that goes back up to alignment, being clear again about all of those pieces. And that's the hard part, because you're dealing with multiple people, different personalities, maybe different learning styles, maybe different learning capabilities. Maybe the way I presented it is not the way they received it. We all have our own perceptions when something is stated to us. Maybe written word in an email isn't the best way. It has to be face to face. So with that piece of it, there's a lot of one-on-one time. I do a lot of one-on-one time with staff members and just asking them, talk to me about how you feel. Again, when I go back to what I said in the beginning about building trust in leadership, that clarity, there's a level of trust with being able to ask questions about clarity. So are they receiving my message the way that I felt I gave it? Are they understanding my expectations, or do they still have question? Can they trust me enough and feel comfortable enough to even ask me the questions that they have? By building that level of trust, and again, having those one-on-one conversations. So I'm not putting them on the spot in front of a big group of people. It's a small staff on that unit right now. There's only 24 staff members, but every week I make it a point to speak to 24 people, unless they're on vacation. But for them, knowing that I expect of myself to set aside at least 15 minutes of my day for each staff member throughout a week, that's dedicating a lot of time. I mean, really and truly, that's dedicating, what is that, 6 hours of my week to my staff, almost an entire day. But I'm telling them that I want this process to work, that I believe in the expectations that I've set. I believe in the wild goal that I've created for us to achieve. But I know there's going to be questions. I know that we have opportunities. I know there are barriers. So again, giving them the empowerment to be able to come forward and say, listen, I don't think part of your process is working. I invite them to challenge it. I say, poke holes in everything I do, because again, it's theirs to own. I want the ownership to go back to them. Let me come up with the process, but let them own it. And when they start to see that they're meeting milestones, again, my big expectation was 18 hours. We were at 29. So my next goal was, okay, we're at 29. How about in the next 30 days, we get to 28? Who thinks we can do it? And I make it a big deal, and I celebrate the fact that we went from 29 to 28, again, empowering them, saying all the questions you asked for clarity, all of the ownership you're starting to take, and the motivation and the inspiration and the momentum you're building regarding this wild expectation I set initially, celebrating the fact that you went from 29 hours to 28 hours. Now that we're all the way down to 20 hours and I have 2 hours to go, and somehow I'm going to find those 2 hours, they're now in the mindset where I don't even have to ask them or let them know, like, hey, this is your 15 minutes with me this week. They're already reaching out to me first thing in the morning and saying, do I have 15 minutes of your time? I'm ready to talk. And it's because all along the way, it's been clear expectations. It's been, you're allowed to fail. You're allowed to have questions. You're allowed to question my process. You're allowed to have feelings about this. You're allowed to feel that something's not working. You're allowed to bring in how the patients received it. All of those are, I guess, sub expectations. They're additional expectations underneath the big one. So for me, it's have that wild goal, set something big and huge that you're almost too afraid to tell people about it, and then break it down. It has to be baby steps. If I go back to weight loss, or for me, this year I signed up for 18 5Ks. Moment of insanity, but I'm bound and determined I'm going to do it. I didn't run a minute over the winter. Am I going to run my fastest time on my first one on April 7th? Absolutely not. Can I expect that I'll at least finish it? I sure will expect that I can at least finish it. But again, if I want to set a wild goal, I might say, listen, last year I finished the year running a 12-minute mile. This year I want to finish running a 10-minute mile. Am I going to run it at the first race? No. Can I expect it for the end of the year? Absolutely. But what does it mean along the way? It means setting milestones. It means setting those smaller expectations for myself, realistic expectations for yourself and for my team. Could they drop 11 hours in a month? No, absolutely not. And I couldn't expect them to do it. Realistically, could they do 1 hour? Sure. So when we talk about realistic expectations and unrealistic, for me, the difference is resources. What makes it unrealistic? If I don't have the resources to accomplish the work. Resources take time, they take energy, and they take effort. It's not just physical resources that you may have. A lot of it for healthcare is physical resources, but for me, the progress we've made, I didn't increase my staff, I didn't increase rooms, none of that happened. What I increased was my time, my energy, and my effort with people. So for me, again, another list of expectations for myself as the leader. I had to invest in them. I had to invest the time. I had to write it on my dry erase board. They won't let me put dry erase paint on the wall, so I couldn't write it on the wall. But I put it on the dry erase board. I put it on my calendar and truly blocked off time with their name so nobody else could schedule time with me. That was theirs, and it had to be sacred. So for me, again, going back to alignment, I needed to align my expectations for myself, mission, vision, values, align it and focus it with the staff. This is what you're going to do. We're going to get there. I'm going to help lead the ship on the way there. Second was accountability and ownership. Let them start taking part in the process. Let them own it. Let them ask the questions. Let them share their fears. Let them ask what barriers am I experiencing as a leader so that they can share what barriers they're experiencing as the staff member? I need to take accountability and ownership that I'm going to put that time on there, and I'm not going to schedule over them. I'm not going to give them 15 minutes of time and then say, oh, you know what? Staffing meeting's more important. They have to know they are the most important people for me in my day. And that when I set that time aside for them, it's theirs. Creating that clear expectation to foster a culture of accountability and ownership, and it has to start with me. Making sure when those responsibilities for them are clearly defined, again, clarity reduces confusion. So clearly defined for them, they're more likely to take ownership of the work that they do. So by setting clear guidelines, clear milestones, again, those milestones are small expectations along the way so that we can get to the ultimate goal. That takes out their guesswork. I can't expect them to know what I'm thinking. And I also can't expect them to try and decide which dawn they're getting every day. I have to know that when I come in every day, that I am honest with what percent I'm functioning at. So again, if I'm having a bad day, if I'm not feeling good, just argued with the kids before they went to school, whatever it was, I can let them know I'm at 70% today. I'm expecting you to be honest with me at what level you're working at, so I need to be honest with them. Making it clear. Again, keeping in mind, what is it like for them to sit across the table from me? What leader are they getting today? I don't want them to have to guess. I don't want them to decide what personality of Dawn is showing up today. So I need to bring clear expectations, a clear and focused leadership style, I guess, for them. Empowering them, trust them to make decisions. If I allow them to question what's going on, if I allow them to share what their barriers are, if I allow them to give me their thoughts and feelings, and I trust that when they say there's a problem with your process, I can look at them and say, great, thank you for bringing that to me. How do we fix it? Including them in that whole entire process. That empowers them. It builds trust with them. Then those expectations are transparent. We can have a two-way conversation about it. They can challenge me and say, Dawn, I think your expectation is unrealistic. And I'm always going to say, what's unrealistic about it? Talk to me about what's preventing you from believing we can get there. And when they start to share their feelings, for me, it may be something I never considered. And so I have to give them the opportunity and the different pathways. So we have one-on-ones. That's a conversation. They have my undivided time. They can talk to me about whatever with it. I'm not sharing that with anybody. Again, a trust level to empower them to speak. I put papers on their break room wall with questions on it about barriers and obstacles. My expectation is that they write on them. They don't sign them. They don't put their name to them, but it gives an opportunity for maybe my softer spoken ones to speak up. But again, giving that sense of empowerment and trusting that when I take that paper off that break room wall and put it on my own wall in my office, that I'm going to do something with it. So the expectations go both ways. And then just that continuous improvement, providing benchmarks for their performance. Those are those milestones to set monthly goals to meet the big ultimate goal, but to constantly and consistently share the data to make sure they know how they're doing, and then celebrating it, celebrating the wins. That's my favorite part of the whole thing, is celebrating the wins, giving that regular feedback against what those expectations are, because again, it allows that connection and circling all the way back, that connection of how are those wins contributing to our organization, to our project, mission, vision, values. How do they make you feel when we get that milestone? How does it make you feel to know that the patient's experience scores are better? How does it make you feel knowing that when I send out the data, I'm sending out the data with you compared to every other department in the organization, and you're on top? So building them up and allowing them to know that they are reaching for success. So yes, my expectations are high. I set those wild goals and they are high, but the milestones along the way and constantly celebrating their performance, it is now become their expectation of me to give them that data. If I go a day without getting it to them, they're asking me, how did I do yesterday? I didn't see your email. I didn't see it posted in the break room. So again, this is such a beautiful circle, because then again, it goes back to accountability. It's accountability for me, again, to continue to foster that culture of ownership. It's allows me to hold them accountable, because then I'm providing them that continuous improvement data. We're having the meetings, we're building that trust and empowerment, we're providing clarity the entire way. Expectations for me is more about goal setting. It's about milestones, celebration, a lot of communication, open-mindedness, and trust.
That is a good list.
Yes. And again, to put it, into something personal for me. So that's my professional way of putting it, but personal for me. So I said, I want to run 5Ks. I want to do 18 of them. It's ridiculous to think about it. But again, I like to set things just high and wild and with the hopes of achieving them. But for me, it's sharing with people. I have a small group that I do these with, and we send text messages every day to say, hey, what did you do today to prepare for that next one? Did you go run? Did you jog? Did you do any kind of workout? Did you just have a lazy day? Did you eat the chocolate cake with caramel icing? Because I did that last night and it was delicious. But it holds me accountable, because if I see I'm going to do this, well, am I going to do it, or did I just put it on paper? Did I do it and post it all over Facebook just so I could get likes, or am I actually going to do it? Am I telling people, like, hey, these are my goals for running this year? They're much faster. All the ladies I run with are much faster than I am. But what I love that they say is, Dawn, you running a 12-minute mile is the same distance as me running an 8-minute mile. We both ran a mile. So for me, that's my clarity, is that reminder that we're all working toward our own personal goals with time. But the bottom line is we're all running the same distance. So we can have that connection, and it takes the guesswork out of it. We're all competing against ourselves in these races. We're all working toward our personal best, but we have a clear defined end line, 3.1 miles. If you're still running after 3.1 miles, then I question your mental state at the time, because I'm ready usually to pass out after that. But by having those conversations and the communication and being very transparent with where we are in our own personal journeys, it just builds that sense of empowerment to speak up and say, listen, I'm the slow girl in the group, and I'm okay with that, because maybe one day I'll be in the middle of the pack. I don't know that I'll ever make the leader of the pack with running, and I'm okay with that. But again, it's continuous improvement. So yesterday it took me 12 minutes and 10 seconds to run a mile. My goal for the end of the year is to do it in 10. But at the beginning of February, it took me 12 minutes and 45 seconds to run a mile. So it's a matter of respecting your journey, trusting yourself, and then doing the work. And again, set those expectations, set them high, but make realistic milestones all along the way.
I like how you look at that end goal and break it down into smaller bites.
Mm-hmm.
I made I'm just kind of going into like this discussion.
Yeah.
Dawn, are you, before I get done. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
Oh, no, you go right ahead.
Okay. Just based on our conversation and all that, I'm like, all right. Um, I wrote down something you said. If it's unrealistic, it's lacking resources. And I really
Right,
think that's that check-in, right? Like, okay,
hmm,
if this isn't working, what am I missing? Right?
right,
And you have a team that brings you those things. Like, hey, this
yeah,
physical thing isn't working, this piece isn't working, this door is jammed, or like you have that right there in front of you and you have a team looking out for you. Because, like you just said, that end goal is the same for everybody, right?
right,
If the goal is to run a mile, we all ran a mile. Like, doesn't matter really how we got there.
hmm.
Um, I think that just made me think of, like, a lot of us are in business for ourselves, or just setting expectations out in the wild, right? Like with the car dealership or the whatever. And when we're in an interchange, right? We all have the same goal. We want to get to where we're going,
Right.
right? And yes, whether it's an interaction in a sales process or that goal of shaving 1 hour off your team's time, right? Um, I took a lot of notes, and then Mary took over my pencil. So, well, she kept taking my pen, so I've got it in pen, pencil, and uh, blue colored pencil. So I have all my notes. Um, is there, before we close out into our live discussion, is there maybe a question someone can ask themselves about how they're setting expectations? If someone came to you and said, "Man, Dawn, you're so good at getting stuff done. How are you setting yourself up for this awesomeness?" Right? Like, what is the question you would ask them that they could go home and say, "Oh, okay. What do you got?"
I, I usually, because I ask everybody to set goals when I meet with them during their annual evaluation, and I write them down because we work on them throughout the year. But what I usually tell them is, number one, are you willing to put in the work to meet whatever goal or expectation you've set for yourself? And then I say, do you have everything that you need to do it? For right now, with what you know right now, do you have all the tools that you need to get there? And if not, what do you already know that you're missing? I ask them to write down their plan. For me, writing it down and putting it in print makes it real. It gives me something to look at. It gives me something to work against. It gives me something to put notes on. Um, it has to be some kind of visual reminder. So, do you already have a plan, or did you just set this wild goal, but you don't even know where to start or how to get there? So, I usually ask them, are you willing to do the work? Do you have all the resources you need? And what's your plan? And that way, then I can help them again align everything that they need, make sure that it's clear, make sure for themselves they understand what it is they're even working toward. I've had some who've set expectations for themselves, but then once they wrote it down, they realized like the goal they were really meaning isn't what they told me in the beginning. Or maybe they had to tweak it based on resources. And then I asked them, who are you willing to have as kind of your accountability buddy? Who are you willing to share your results with, or your process with, or just vent to about your barriers? Because too often, if we're doing it by ourselves, once we hit that first roadblock, we're like, nobody knows I was working at it anyway. It's very easy just to slide out of the way and quit.
Hmm.
So I really encourage people to have that accountability partner. And then in creating a plan, what milestones do you want to achieve between here and your ultimate goal? That way, again, you don't become discouraged. You know, you're not going to meet that goal right away. Or what are you going to do if you have a setback? What are your thoughts right now, how you're going to overcome it? A lot of times they don't have all the answers, and I let them know that's okay. And that's where I tell them they have to trust the journey, but they can't give up. So anytime we set an expectation as an individual, I always encourage them, you know, have clear alignment with where you want to go, have an accountability buddy, write them down. Do you have the resources? What are your milestones? And then what right now is your thought process if you have a setback? What will you do?
I
Because
love
giving up's
that.
not an option.
I love that. So with that, let's go into our live discussion. And I love what you said about that. Like, we are that place of the positive peer pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can bring those lamentations that say, ah, I need some commisery on this because I don't know where I'm going, right? And we can all pick each other up, share the resources, right? We're really good at sharing resources here. Um, Maybe it's that book recommendation or that accountability buddy or whatever that is. So with that, we're going to go into our live discussion. So if you're here on the replay, be sure, drop your questions, raise your hand, do your thing. Join us here live sometime soon. Ask any one of us for a link, and we are happy to share to come in and experience this in real time. And with that, I'm going to end our recording, probably set Mary down, and we're going to ask these questions of ourselves. So thank you so much for joining us today. Talk soon.